Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel. Wherever you are in the world, you're so welcome, and I'm so delighted you've joined me today. And I want to send each and every one of you so much love because you deserve that. And I hope you're in good form and that you're not getting too cold with the weather getting colder now. And I hope you're ready for Christmas because it's around the next corner. I've got a lovely story for you tonight, but before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Rolf and I'm from West Virginia. My Bigfoot encounter happened in 2015 when I was 25 years old at the time. I grew up in a beautiful traditional style farmhouse that was built by my father's brother, who is a master builder, who created us a sumptuous home that just looked so perfectly harmonious, nestled in the idyllic emerald green valley, surrounded by exquisite statuesque mountains and acres of dreamy forest, not to mention lily-covered ponds and silvery lakes. Our two-storied farmhouse has the whimsical character and charm of an 1800s home, with whitewashed walls, large beautiful French-styled windows and a grey slate roof. The house has its own beautifully constructed wooden wraparound porch with a vast area for entertainment that has been set up with the finest barbecue equipment and a built-in bar and sumptuous seating area, all decked out with cosy, colourful cushions. I adore this outdoor retreat because it overlooks a large silvery lake, which means you can literally sit back and enjoy the enchanting panoramic views and watch some of the indigenous wildlife frequent the area for a drink, from white-tailed deers to raccoons, and let's not forget to mention the most extraordinary bird life. To access our home, you literally have to drive down a long, windy dirt road and take a right turning towards a large farm gate, and then you have to drive down a long gravel driveway until you get to a semicircular paved area that has been neatly landscaped with hedges and beds of colourful flowers, and yards away is a grandiose stone staircase that leads up to our large front door. I was born in this house on the kitchen floor, delivered by my dad, as the emergency services had not arrived in time. I had decided to be born at once, without waiting for anyone. My mother describes my delivery as almost effortless, because I was coming out hell or high water, and by contrast my older brother Christian seemed to be very reluctant to be born, and my mother battled to deliver him. In a peculiarly strange way, the way we were born almost mirrors our personalities, something my mother is always so quick to point out. For example, I make decisions very quickly and decisively, and I'm efficient, systematic and on the ball, while my ambivalent brother agonises over every single decision he actually makes, and it's such a long, drawn-out, lengthy and tentative process. Even simple things growing up, like buying a handful of candies, would have him studying the sweets for literally ages, pontificating and wavering about which sweets to invariably buy. In contrast, it literally took me seconds to select mine. I remember my mother would become so infuriated with my brother and say, "For goodness sake, Christian, hurry up," she'd say. "You're choosing candies. You're not deciding whether or not to bomb Pearl Harbor." I remember Christian had been dating his girlfriend Vanessa for over 8 years, yet he couldn't make a decisive decision whether to marry her or not. I remember him hesitantly going through a long list of drawn-out pros and cons, as if he was buying a car, and the family teased him relentlessly about it. Finally, my dad helped him by giving him a nudge in the right direction, by suggesting that if he didn't pop the question to Vanessa, someone else might just whisk her away from him. That thought terrified him so much that he finally proposed to her and is now happily married with a baby on the way. Growing up with a brother 6 years older than myself was surprisingly pretty cool, because he would teach me how to fish, hunt, and he taught me all kinds of stuff about camping and wilderness survival. The one thing that my brother couldn't teach me was how to date, because he was so indecisive and irresolute about women, which invariably meant his dating life was an unequivocal fiasco. I did not want to take any lessons from him. Yet my dating life, on the other hand, was not much better than his was, if I'm being blatantly honest. It was not for lack of trying, of course, but when it comes to dating women, I found it exceedingly hard to find the kind of girl that I was actually looking for. And while physical attraction is very significant to me, personality is absolutely everything, because I didn't want to end up living the rest of my life with a bitter, sour old shrew, And believe it or not, it happens to people rarely, frequently, and more than you know, because I've been witness to those kind of marriages firsthand, and it's definitely not for me. My best friend Carl is already getting divorced from a woman who ticked all the physical boxes. I gather at one time she was a prom queen. Needless to say, he was soon to discover that there were cracks in that seemingly perfect veneer. He told me once living with her was like being married to the Axeman, because she started beating him up with frying pans and cricket bats, and she bullied him tirelessly, exposing him to the very real world of physical delusion, which he believed had ultimately tricked him into marrying her in the first place. He admits he thought the wrapper looked so good on the outside that he was pretty sure the rest would be equally as delicious, but it appeared he was very, very wrong. Just because the chocolate is good on the outside does not mean it tastes good on the inside, so I had no intention of falling into the same old deceptive trap. However, I did not want to date someone with a face like a robber's dog either, but it would seem I was having such rotten luck with all my dates. I had tried all the dating apps and met some really scary women, and when I say scary, I mean pretty terrifying to say the least. I guess I was just having rotten luck. One girl I chose to meet on a recent date looked really endearing from her filtered photographs, but when I finally met her, I realised her biceps were bigger than mine, and she looked like she was lifting weights for the world's strongest men competition, let alone world's strongest woman. When I met her, she picked me up in her arms like I was a feather and carried me back to my car. I do not believe I've ever felt more emasculated or humiliated in my entire life. Worse still, there was an audience of bystanders saying, "You go, girl! Up with woman's lib!" And everybody was clapping and whistling. So there I was, ready to go on my speed dating experience, which was being held in a bar in Charleston, which was not too far away from where I actually reside. So there I was, ready to engage in the strange courting ritual. And so for several minutes I found myself speaking to several women very, very quickly. And by the end of the evening I had 3 promising phone numbers in my repertoire, but I decided to phone the girl that had beguiled me the most, whose name was Maria. It was decided that I'd pick her up from her home on a Friday night and take her out for dinner to a sumptuous Italian restaurant in Charleston with an excellent reputation for its delicious Italian cuisine. I had learnt from Maria that she had a particular penchant for Italian food. She was an attractive woman with a seemingly rather endearing personality. So I remember arriving at her Charleston address, and I realised immediately that she came from a lot of money, but I detected it was very definitely new money. I felt a little overwhelmed driving up the opulent driveway to the palatial, extravagant Italianite mansion that looked so illustrious and nouveau riche. It actually made me feel nauseously sick. To put it mildly, the house was over the top in its grandiosity, and there were statues of the David absolutely everywhere, and even a few inappropriate David statues, including a David fountain where he was peeing the water with a strong current of spray into the pond, which, shall we say, was a wee bit intimidating. Every part of the garden was perfectly manicured, and some of the hedges had been shaped into eagles. I parked my simple-looking car against a couple of gleaming black Bentleys, and made my way to the very grand carved, highly decorated front door, carrying a rather bedraggled-looking red rose in my hand for Maria. The door was immediately whisked open, and I was ushered into a very lavish, deluxe, ornate living room, where no expense had been spared, and even the silken upholstered, carved oak and mahogany furnishings were accentuated with gold leaf, and although everything was incredibly grand and swanky, it was really rather tasteless in design and in your face. Suddenly a man walked into the room who looked like a drug lord or baron, as he was very tough and beefy looking, with a massive rippling biceps. I noticed he was wearing a crisp white open shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and on his tanned hairy chest he was wearing some thick gold chains, and even his fingers were adorned with large gold brassy-looking rings. I noticed his dark hair was swept back in a very modern hairstyle, and his broad, rugged face was rough, weather-beaten, and very thuggish-looking. He gave me the impression that he was a pugnacious, belligerent individual who looked even more threatening than Boris the Rottweiler. Now that was saying something. It was clear to me that this was Maria's father, who immediately indicated for me to sit down and proceeded to pour me a tot of whisky. "So you are taking my daughter out tonight," he said, handing me the glass, which I drank quickly to calm down my escalating nerves. "That's right. It's just a sweet little Italian place in Charleston, I said awkwardly. It's got a good reputation for very decent Italian dishes. Maria's father said nothing, but studied me ever so closely, as if he was sussing out whether I was a potential suitor for his daughter, and whether I was good enough. "What is it you do?" he asked me. "What kind of business are you in?" "I'm working as an associate attorney, sir," I said, looking rather uncomfortable. "May I ask you," he said, looking at me with such a stern look on his face, "what are your intentions with my daughter?" "Nothing, sir," I said. "I'm just taking her out for dinner on a date, just to get to know her. That's all." Maria's father looked at me and said, "Maria likes you a lot. Now you do not mess with my girl, or you mess with me," he said, pointing an accusory, warning finger at me in rather a threatening gesture. When he said that, his tone became dangerously aggressive, but then he suddenly turned up the charm, as suddenly as the control of a television set, and said, "Now you both go and have a very nice evening, will you?" Fast forward a few weeks, and I'd been seeing Maria much more regularly, and I was enjoying her company, but she was beginning to show signs of an obsessive personality type, which was exceedingly worrying for me. It was like every minute of the day she was texting and phoning me, always asking me what I was doing or where I was, as if she was checking up on me. When someone begins to hound you like this, let me assure you it is exceedingly frustrating. The only way I can describe it to you is that you feel a sense of claustrophobia, like you cannot breathe, because someone is squeezing the very life out of you. What was extraordinary was that we were not going steady, but she was acting as if we were already married and joined at the hips. The more we dated, the more possessive and insecure she actually became, and as our relationship progressed, the phone calls and text messages escalated at such an alarming rate, so much so that I began to switch off my phone. On our next date, I actually told Maria that our relationship was getting way too serious and going far too fast for me, and I'd like to slow things down a little. "You're breaking up with me, aren't you?" she cried out in horror. "I knew this was too good to be true." "No," I said. "I like you a lot, Maria, but I want to slow things down, that's all." Maria looked absolutely furious, and when I dropped her at her home, she never said a word to me, but sulked like an indignant, embittered, petulant child who was not getting her way, and she sat there with an ugly pout on her face. I dropped Maria at home and was beginning to realise that this relationship was not going to work out in the end. I wish I'd ended things then and there, but at least I'd made it clear to Maria to stop hounding me with text messages and phone calls. The next day I woke up to find that I had 60 text messages, all from Maria's father, saying, "If you mess with my daughter, you mess with me. I warned you about this. You better watch your back, because I'm coming to get you." I remember feeling very uneasy and overwrought, and over the next few days I was pretty certain I was being followed everywhere I went by a very dark black car, which was very disconcerting and discomforting for me, but I told myself I was imagining things because the alternative seemed too dreadful to even comprehend. I mean, surely Maria's father was not going to act out on his threats and have me followed. Of course not, I assured myself. That would be crazy. I had not heard from Maria, and when I actually told my mother what had transpired, she assured me that Maria probably assumed that I'd already ended the relationship. "If you told her you wanted to slow down," my mother explained, "you're inadvertently telling her, 'I'm out of here and it's over.'" I was relieved to hear my mother say that. I realised how good it felt to feel footloose and fancy-free again, because Maria had smothered me so much that I literally couldn't breathe at all. I decided I'd give dating a wide berth for a while, which was a huge relief for me, but the discomposing feeling that I was in fact being followed and watched wherever I went was very uncomfortable for me, but I kept telling myself that I was imagining things. On the Saturday evening I usually had the house to myself, as my parents would invariably go to a friend's house in Charleston to play bridge, because they were both passionate about the game. This meant I had the house all to myself, so I put my feet up in the living room and ate a pizza while watching Netflix on my phone, until I realised my phone needed charging, which meant going back to my bedroom. Feeling too lazy to take the exercise to my bedroom, I just switched on the television instead to watch some sport, and subsequently fell fast asleep on the couch. I was awoken to the very distinct sounds of tyres crunching on gravel. My first thought was that my parents had returned home. I realised it was rather early, as it was only 10 in the evening, and as I looked out of the window, I could see 2 men carrying batons and walking stealthily towards the front door. I recognised one of the men at once as being Maria's father, and I was in no uncertain terms that he wanted blood. Before I knew it, he'd smashed down the front door, and that was when I had no option but to run away as fast as I could. I made my way out of the back door and ran towards the woods. I'd played in those woods tirelessly as a young boy and knew where the great hiding spots were. I heard one of the men cry, "He's gone into the woods, after him!" I could hear their feet running after me at 100 miles an hour. I ran towards my hiding place, which is actually a hollowed oak tree in the woods that I discovered by chance as a child, and while it stands tall and proud, it has an incredible space where you can hide without being detected. I squeezed myself into the hollow as quickly as I could and stayed there very still, hardly daring to breathe. "We'll find you," I heard Maria's father roaring. "We'll find you and kill you. No one breaks my daughter's heart, you hear me? No one and walks away. You hear me, boy? I knew the second I laid eyes on you that you were trouble." My heart was beating violently in my chest, and my hair was standing on edge. Maria's father meant business, and he fully intended to kill me, and I'd end up being one of those missing people that suddenly vanish every year, never to be seen or heard from again. I did not want to repeat some of the obscene words that Maria's father was expressing as he and his friend started searching for me with their flashlights, lighting the way, looking through every nook and cranny to try and find me. But let's just say there were a lot of F-bombs being flung around. They were just reaching the area of the woods where I was hiding, when I could see Maria's father bashing the long undergrowth with his baton as he was searching for me. Suddenly there was this loud booming sound that was so thunderously loud it actually made the ground vibrate and shake, and this sound appeared to be moving towards us, and in truth it sounded like a herd of elephants racing through the thicket at 1,000 miles an hour. "What the hell is that?" I heard Maria's father say. He looked very startled. The next thing I knew was that this monstrous black shadowy form came thundering towards the 2 men, and was growling fiercely at them with its lips curled back to expose its white shiny teeth. There are no words in the English dictionary worthy of describing the creature that I saw to you. This humanoid critter, which I realised at once was the mythical Bigfoot, was unlike anything I've ever seen before. The creature was absolutely colossal. It must have been easily 1,000 pounds, 10 foot tall, 4 foot wide, and was covered with long, dense, jet-black hair. I could see this clearly because of the light of the full moon and the silvery stars, and for some peculiar reason that I cannot explain, it was actually a very light night, which was very fortunate. This disgruntled Bigfoot was incensed, volatile, explosive, and very clearly foaming at the mouth. He was that irate. Try and imagine an elephant in musk expressing rage. Well, the hot-blooded anger that this creature exuded was easily as intimidating, and possibly more so. The wrathful creature was stamping its feet in an embittered way, and thumping its chest very violently, and it roared furiously at the men. I could see Maria's father and friends standing with looks of terrified trepidation on their faces, and to my astonishment, they didn't even run. It was like they were frozen to the spot like statues of ice, with eyes growing as wide as saucers and mouths wide open in an expression of unadulterated terror. I know it sounds crazy, but I swear to you that those 2 men sweated like pigs, and I could smell the fear in their body odour, and I was to learn later that fear has a smell, and it is a smell that I shall never forget. Suddenly the Bigfoot snatched the batons from the 2 men's hands with a look of appalled revulsion on his face, and he threw them into the forest where they landed somewhere in the thicket. He then throttled Maria's father and threw him across the ground like a soccer ball, where he landed on some soft ground, lucky for him. I watched him crawling back on his feet and staggering away like a drunk. His friend was literally begging the Bigfoot not to hurt him. "Please no, 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 please no," he begged. The Bigfoot picked him in his arms and tossed him into the tall undergrowth. I could hear the man groaning out in agony, but he managed to get up and hobble away. I think he'd actually broken his wrist because his hand was dangling off his arm like a large skin tag. The Bigfoot mock charged him again, and screaming at the top of his lungs, the man bustled away as fast as he possibly could. For a while the Bigfoot made some frustrated, rather indignant grunting sounds, as if to say, "Oh, those men are disgusting," and then he seemed to calm down, and I watched him glide away into the forest with a seamless grace. I couldn't actually believe that I'd seen Bigfoot. To cut a long story short, Maria called me and begged me not to lay any charges against her dad, whom I am certain would have killed me or beaten me to a pulp given half a chance. I told her that if he came anywhere near me, I would literally call the police and file charges against him, and I also told her that if anything untoward mysteriously happened to me, the finger of blame would invariably be laid at her dad's door. I also told her that the Bigfoot in the woods actually is a friend of mine, and he'll beat you up if you come near me again. Of course, that was a lie, but I knew any mention of the hairy man would leave Maria's thuggish father shaking in his boots, and it seemed to have done the trick. A year after that harrowing event with Maria's father, and of course encountering the Bigfoot, I decided once and for all that I would never ever go speed dating or searching for love online. It all seemed so misleading to me, and I just didn't want to go down that path again. One day when I was shopping with my mother in the local supermarket, a young woman asked me if I could reach for some juice for her on the top shelf, and for some reason we ended up talking about juice and the flavours that we liked. I told her I knew of a lovely place where they made the best fresh juices, so we got together on a date. Well, just for a glass of juice, I suppose. And now I'm married to that girl today, and am exceedingly happy. So there you are. That's my story. Rolf, thank you so much for that incredible, incredible story. I loved your description of just the dating challenges that you absolutely faced. They were extraordinary. And, oh, Maria's father, he was one in a million. A very, very scary man. Until next time, goodbye and good night.